You were with the SLPP when that party was at the height of power. And that party is the reason that the country is in so many crises right now. And now some of you all have got together and formed a new party. But why do you think the people should give you all another chance? Like, where do you all stand in terms of providing solutions to the people?
See, firstly, if you say SLPP is the reason why the country is in this situation, I do not agree to that. They are partly responsible. Because if you look at this economic crisis, it has a history. No country can go into bankruptcy in 2 years' time. The problem goes back probably almost 20 years, right? Let's say after the end of the war, we had an opportunity to overcome all the problems we have had due to 30 years long war and to develop this country in a systematic manner. But the things that were done by successive governments after that, 3 governments, did not help the economy much. So when it came to 2019, when the SLPP first comes to power by with the president, the country was already in economic turmoil. The country's economic growth, which was 5.5% in 2015, had gone down to 2.1%. Right? Rupee has got devalued. The debt has gone up from 7.4 trillion to 13 trillion. There were sovereign bonds which were obtained during 5-year period, which total up to about 12.5 billion US dollars. So all those problems were there. Where Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government, which I also represented, went wrong, was they couldn't prevent the problem. But we had told very categorically how we are going to do that in our manifesto. The Vistas of Prosperity manifesto, which was developed by a large number of intellectuals together, with the support of so many other groups, had spelled out what we are going to do. But unfortunately, what happened was under Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his cabinet, who is basically the executive, did not implement the policy as we promised. So that is what went wrong. So that is why they couldn't prevent the problem, and finally the country got into
Dr. Godahewa, I'm trying to figure out. I cannot stomach that.
Let me finish. So what? To finish her question, so you're asking why should people trust us? People should trust the manifesto, not us, right? People should trust the manifesto, which is presented to people, which is not implemented by
Dr. Godahewa, in 2021, when everything was hunky-dory as far as the SLPP government was concerned, in May 2021, the fertilizer ban came into play. Don't all take responsibility for that?
No. Go back to the manifesto. That's why I said go back to the manifesto.
Manifesto very clearly articulates it's a 10-year program.
Exactly.
However, not immediately.
Exactly.
That was never mentioned in the manifesto.
Shamir, that's exactly my point. The manifesto said 10 years.
So if that was the case, you all should have walked out of the cabinet then.
I was not in the cabinet.
No,
I was not in the cabinet.
But you were a prominent minister at that time.
No, I was
state minister.
No, I was handling a state ministry of urban development, where I was doing my job. See, this problem in a cabinet, there are responsible
You want
people.
to walk out, Dr. Godahewa, in February this year. That last year, February.
Correct.
After everything was over, after everything
Shamir,
was on a tipping point.
Now listen, when a government comes to power, we were in the government. I was in the government only 18 months, right? After 18 months, we come out. The president was there, of course, but we were there with the government only 18 months. 18 months is a very long, not a very long period. We were elected. I was elected for a 5-year term, right? So we had time to serve the people. But after 18 months, we took a decision to come out. So one can argue and say, why 18 months? It could have been 15 or it could have been 14. What's the difference? We didn't even complete 1/3 of our tenure.
Dr. Godahewa,
we decided to walk out.
I remember in 2020, now you said we need to go 20 years back to see why the country got bankrupt, and that a country can't go into bankruptcy within the period of 2 years. I think it was in 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Vikramaratne, that I believe you and Harsha De Silva came out in Parliament and said, look here, we're going to face a liquidity issue like this, we need to go to the IMF. And it was at that point that members of your government who sat on your aisle of Parliament said, you know, over my dead body. Ministers like Vasudeva Nalaka said, no way, over my dead body. Where did you stand when that matter came up?
If you go back to my speeches, my social media clips, etc., I have been saying that we have to go to IMF, even at the early parts of 2022. The discussion came up at that time. So there were different views. We were saying we have to go to IMF. right? So some people were saying we shouldn't. You quoted the example of Honorable Vasudeva Nalaka. Yes, he said then shouldn't go. He will say the same thing even now. So people have different views within the same party. But at that time, we were not opposing that. Like this government is responsible for not doing their job. When they came, they knew there's going to be a problem. It is not a surprise. 2 years before, we knew the problem was coming. Everybody was talking about that. Even from inside, we were saying that. But they couldn't prevent that. So they definitely mismanaged. There's no question about it.
Dr. Godahewa, let's look at one of your statements from the 15th of June 2021. I don't know whether you recollect what happened on that day, but let me refresh your memory. You say that ministers don't have as many luxury vehicles as you think. And then you say that you are using your own vehicle and 2 other private vehicles for official purposes, although you are entitled to get 3 official vehicles. Now, this was in 2021 when all this, before all this happened. So even at that time, you as a state minister was requesting for luxury?
No, not at all. In fact, now you've gone back to that instance. Let me explain what happened. I was explaining to a couple of journalists. In fact, I didn't know that they were recording that. I was explaining to them about an MP who was travelling by bus to Parliament. It's Dr. Tilak Rajapaksa, who is with us right now, with one of the 13 MPs who left. He was travelling every weekend by bus to Colombo. He's an MP. I was referring to MPs. I was saying a lot of people think when you go to Parliament, everybody is getting vehicles. I was trying to explain to those guys, it is not. The MPs are not getting vehicles. I was saying there's one MP who travels by bus to the Parliament, and that was misquoted. I was not referring to the ministers. Ministers, of course, every minister is entitled for...
it's not that you wanted a luxury vehicle.
Not at all. Not at all. I never used Shamir. I didn't even take security. I probably am the only Parliament MP in the Parliament right now who never asked for security.
So let's talk about
whether as a minister or as a parliamentarian, I have never asked for anything.
Let's talk about the future of elections now. Your party, the Freedom People's Alliance, is looking at contesting from the symbol of the helicopter. Now, Shalan posed a very important question to you with regard to the IMF stand as well. Now, one of the constituent parties are against going to the IMF. That is Minister Vasudeva Nalaka's party. Now, how do you manage all this?
But see,
now you all are looking at securing power one day in this country, and you all have double standards within the party itself. How can you all steer a country with having disputes within a political party?
Samir, we must explain this alliance first. See, this alliance was formed to face the local government election, right? The alliance was formed only on 11 January.
This is temporary.
No, not temporary. I'm saying it is still evolving. The election was called in January. On the 11th of January, 12 parties got together and formed an alliance. At that time, we were trying to get as many opposition parties possible together to contest this election. So 12 parties agreed, right? That does not mean that same 12 parties are the ones going to face a general election or a presidential election. It could be more, it could be less, because you need to discuss and agree on the overall national policy framework. So obviously there are differences.
So then that means Vasudeva Nalaka will step out at that time.
No, I won't say that. We may, who knows? I might step out. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But what I'm saying is, these
so why must we have faith in a temporary setup?
No, it's not a temporary setup. What I'm saying is, when these things are discussed in detail, this alliance might grow in number or can come less. Anything is possible.
So now SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance?
SLFP as a party is with the Freedom Alliance. At the same time, one group of SLP are contesting separately in certain districts.
So I didn't understand that. Now SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance, but I saw a statement that was made by Maithripala Sirisena saying that they won't be going with the Freedom People's Alliance. Only on certain electorates they will contest together, and on certain electorates they will contest from the hand symbol.
I also don't understand why they do that, but let me explain their argument. See, when the way this local...
Can I simply say SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance? Maithripala Sirisena is not with the People's Freedom Alliance. Can I safely say that?
It appears so. It appears so because they were originally with the Freedom Alliance. The original agreement was everybody would contest on the helicopter symbol. But at one point, they took a decision in certain districts they will contest under hand symbol.
Dr.
So-
Godahewa, if I can add to that.
Yeah.
You said that the party formed with the initial intention of preparing for the local government election. But some people, they think that the local government election is not going to be as effective as we are thinking it will be. What do you think about that? What is your plan? Because if you all are not going to take part in like or contest for a general election or presidential election with this party, what are your plans after the local government election?
No. I think you misunderstood. What I didn't say that we are not contesting under this party.
Okay.
Or with all good intentions, we want to continue this. We have formed an alliance, we want to refine it, and we want to continue. If all 12 parties stick together, better. In fact, we want more.
Okay.
When we were demanding a local government election, actually 16 parties came together. At one point, there were 25 parties sitting together and demanding a local government election along with us. Not all parties are represented in the parliament. So our intention is to grow this alliance, and we might invite some bigger parties also in time to come, because at the end of the day, we think now the country is in a total economic mess. We have to come out of this situation. We as politicians have a responsibility to work towards that. In that, we believe as many parties as possible have to come together. But there are certain principles that we need to agree. One is the economic management policy, which has to be debated in greater detail.
Dr. Godahewa, there's been a lot of scrutiny over, what you have said and a lot of things in the past. But looking to the future, what are your recommendations for stimulating foreign investment?
See, before stimulating foreign investment, you need to stimulate the local economy. That's where the current government is going wrong. See, the answer to all these ills is to get the economy activated now. So what is an economy? Economy is a collection of exchanges. Somebody sells, somebody buys, there are exchanges that are taking place. And unless you grow these exchanges, the economy is not going to grow. What do you mean by GDP, gross domestic product, is a collection of exchanges. So in Sri Lanka right now, who is suffering most with the current government's economic policies? The small and medium business sector. The bigger businesses are no difference. Everybody is struggling. So rather than encouraging these people and supporting these people to increase their activities, the government's high taxation policy, high interest policy, and all those things are actually contracting the economy. So we don't believe in that. We believe in supporting the small and medium sector. We believe in supporting the professionals, getting this whole economic activities revamped once again. In fact, that is what we're talking about, 2019 as well.
So, please ask Dr. Godahewa, why was he adamantly in denial of the Express Pearl disaster and its impact on the environment and livelihoods of the people of Sri Lanka? You said at that time that compensation can be obtained. What was done about it for quantifying the damage by any institution or the compensation received? Can you explain?
Samir, for the gentleman or the lady, tell her.
So it's definitely sure it's a male.
So you tell him.
Yes.
So you tell him
Right.
that Dr. Nalaka Godahewa was the state minister in charge only for 2 weeks. After the Express Pearl incident took place, after 2 weeks, that institute, MIPA, was taken out of me and handed over to a different state minister. And there was a committee, ministerial committee, 4 members responsible for handling all these compensation. I was not part of that. So I'm not in a position to answer.
Isn't that the very reason that accountability has to lie as far as government sector employees or ministers are concerned?
I think there has to be accountability. But I'm saying accountability on the part of the person who handled it. No? Accountability can be on the part of somebody who was never there when that compensation process was handled. I was not there.
What is the stand of the Freedom People's Alliance on economic policy in Sri Lanka? Because yesterday, with so much of pomp and pageantry on Valentine's Day, the SJB unveiled its economic blueprint. What is the policy of the Freedom People's Alliance? Now you all are going for an election as well, so it's important to discuss about it.
Freedom People's Congress, which we formed after we left the government, the 13 MPs, presented our economic policy and also our political framework at BMICH about 3 months ago. In that, we have spelled out about 10 different areas where we believe there has to be focus for economic revival. It is not just one thing. There are so many different things that need to be done. For example, if I may touch on just one or two things, we believe the first and foremost, is the getting the entrepreneurial culture, the business culture back on track. Because if you look at Sri Lanka's number of entrepreneurs in the country, is about 2.6%, very, very low compared to any other country in the region, right? So why is that? That is because it is so difficult for somebody to start a business first. Secondly, the entrepreneurial culture is not taught in schools. The youth are not encouraged to go and start a business. They are always encouraged to go and work for somebody else. So just creating that culture is not going to happen haphazardly. It has to be done in a focused manner, and there has to be supporting the startups, low income loans, and so many things have to be done. I'm just cutting short a lot of things that we mentioned. Second one is the digitalization, right? In Sri Lanka, when you talk about corruption, I think Honorable Iran also mentioned, corruption is one of the biggest problems in this country. If you look at all these economic problems, corruption is top to bottom, not only politicians, all throughout there's corruption. So one best way to curb corruption,
even the bureaucrats,
bureaucrats everywhere, it's everywhere, right? Is digitalization, the government processes. So you minimize the opportunity for human interaction. The opportunity for corruption comes when there's human interaction. So digitalization is something that I think if we form a government, or if we are part of a government, something that has to be done very, very fast, and that has to be a priority for the country.
Dr. Godahewa, I think a month ago, TISL released this CPI, Corruption Perception Index, and Sri Lanka slipped 8 ranks down in terms of corruption. And I feel like the way people see it, corruption and politics go hand in hand. Well, are you all going to do something different to prove the people wrong? Not everybody, but some, or majority.
I joined the government sector after leaving the private sector, relatively young, as a service to the government. I joined the government sector at the age of 48 or something, right? Thereafter, after about 7 years, I came to politics as a politician. One thing I learned is that if you want to put this country back on track, corruption is the biggest issue. Corruption is the biggest issue. There's nothing else than corruption. Because if you look at the total, the money that we have spent and disappeared over the last 2 decades, a big chunk of that is due to corruption. It's very, very clear on that. So, I'm totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
That has to be a priority of the government. But the problem is when you say you are fighting corruption, that can't be for a political purpose. Now, for example, in 2015, when the Yahapalana government won the election, that was primarily on corruption. No? At that time, the issue was corruption. In 2019, it was security. 2015, it was corruption. But after they came to power, as Samir very correctly said, before 3 months passed, the infamous bond scam took place. And how many major corrupt deals took place during that time? But at the same time, they were going after opposition politicians. So the whole issue was, how to make use of this issue to gain a political advantage. That should not be the case. You must be genuinely focused on curbing corruption if you want to put this country back on track.
But Dr. Godahewa, do you think that it's high time to dissolve Parliament? It's not about the local government elections, but dissolve Parliament and go for a fresh mandate from the people? Would that be a good option?
If you ask me for my choice,
yeah,
I would prefer general election, because right now the problem is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the Parliament has lost credibility by supporting a person who was rejected by 98% of the people of this country. I gave you the figures. 11.2 million people voted for parties other than the UMP. Ranil Wickremesinghe got only 249,000 votes. So which means he has got only 2.1%. So now when this Parliament brings him as the president, and also the person who was very much the creator of the problem, to solve the problem, it has lost its legitimacy. So that is why I think there has to be a general election. Then coming back to your question from Honorable Iran, It's true, Samir. The parliamentary elections are not due now. They are due in another 2 years' time. Presidential election, unless the president calls in one in advance, that is also due in 2 years' time.
And we all know that he's not going to call for election.
However, why is there a provision in the constitution that the president can dissolve the parliament after 2.5 years? Is things can change if the ground situation changes, and if the situation demands.
But we know he's not going to do that.
There's a constitutional provision for that. So I think right now that situation has arisen.
And you think the president should call for a general election?
He has to. But he has no mandate. The government has no mandate. Look at the problems on the street. So many protests, right? So many strikes. And can a country go on like this?
So, Dr. Godahewa, I recollect you were one of the champions who brought Gotabaya Rajapaksa to play. One of the organizations, like the Vietmaga organization, was founded by you, and you were a very staunch supporter, acting as a patron as far as this organization was concerned as well. Iran was talking about having a good team. If we look at the past, we all knew that the Vietmaga had a good team of professionals, but they ruined the country at the end of the day.
Samir,
and when we speak about these teams, people are very skeptic. We don't want an SJB team. We don't want an NPP team. Iran, in fact, told right at the start, don't trust any leaders.
Samir, this is a frequent question and a false accusation. No,
Why had a false accusation?
No, let me explain. You said Vietmaga had a team, right? That is correct. But did Vietmaga run the country?
Cabinet at that
no,
time?
Exactly. So tell me one person was in the cabinet from Vietmaga. Tell me one person. Tell me a name.
There was a lot of state ministers.
There were state ministers.
I can name a few state ministers.
Yes, of course. I was also state minister, no, right? But who runs the country? State ministers or the cabinet ministers? Who is the executive? The president of the cabinet takes the decision.
But if you look at the cabinet at that time,
state minister can't even submit the cabinet paper. State minister can't even submit the cabinet paper.
But if you look at the state ministerial portfolios at that time and cabinet portfolios, state ministers were not directly reporting to cabinet ministers. It was not gazetted that way. It was, you all were able to independently act. Now, we all are journalists and we know what was going on at that time in the government. That is why I'm posing this question. Iran was initially asking us whether we are aware of what's happening. Of course we are. And that is why we are here on this side of the table, and that is why you are there on the other side of the table. So we know what happened at that time.
Samir, let me explain that, because general public is listening.
Absolutely.
Yes, it was gazetted, right? But for a state minister to independently run his ministry, he should be able to submit his papers to the cabinet. But he couldn't do that. After the creating the state minister concept, President realized it's not going to work. At the end of the day, everybody has to go through the cabinet minister. And take my example. It was worst, because I didn't even have a secretary. Here I'm the state minister for urban development. I don't have a secretary. I have to work with the secretary of the cabinet minister. So when he has little time, spare time, he will look at the requirements of the state minister.
Do you now regret?
What kind of power is that?
Now, do you regret now that you all supported Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
Very much.
You all regret?
Very much. Very much. I think we took a wrong decision, because we thought he would fulfill the promises that was given to the people, and we trusted him not to be a non-Rajapaksa, right? Because 2015, the country.
You were one of the people who polled the highest number of preferential votes from your district. Now, when you go back asking to vote for the Freedom People's Alliance from the Gampaha district, what do you tell them and what do people tell you?
Because I'm the only MP in the Gampaha district who stood by the people. I'm the only one who left the government. There are 13 MPs.
But there was one point, at one instance, you wanted to leave the government, but you didn't leave. Remember?
Yes, so that is also important for you to explain, no?
Yeah.
After
from May onwards.
After Honorable Gamini Jayasuriya resigned from the J.R. Javadana cabinet in 1987, opposing a decision by the president, to my knowledge, I'm the only minister who resigned on principle. When I was appointed the Minister of Mass Media, on the second day, I went and resigned. I said, I resigned, change this cabinet, right? Form a different system. Yeah, he didn't accept. He, in fact, President said, don't do it now because it'll be a slap on my face. Wait for 1 week. So I waited for 1 week, and that's it. But I resigned. Right? If I wanted all those powers, I would have stayed. But I left. in the Gampa district, I can always tell that 325,000 people, I have not cheated you. I have stood by you. I'm the only one who left.
I want to pick the brains of Dr. Godahewa, Rohana and Iran on what is the future for Sri Lanka, because now we are at a decisive time and we have to decide how we're going to steer the next few months, which are very, very crucial for Sri Lanka. What is the stand of the Freedom People's Alliance as far as the way forward is concerned on Sri Lanka? What are the plans you all have in place? So I'll give you 3 minutes, Dr. Godahewa, to sum up.
See, all of us agree that we are in a really bad economic situation as at now. Not only economic, politically also, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a president and a government who do not have the people's real mandate. So I think the starting point is bringing political stability to this situation by having a general election, probably followed by a presidential election as early as possible, and bring some kind of political stability. In that, I think it is time that we look at all political parties, particularly in the opposition, and see how we can bring together the best team together, because we have a huge dearth of good people in this country. That's a fact. That is a common problem everywhere, even in the political parties. I can't see a single political party who can say, okay, I have a full team which can run this country effectively, because people are scattered. So that is why Freedom People's Congress, when we formed, we tried to bring all political parties together in the opposition for every discussion. So, answer to your question, I think what we would look at is see how we can bring the best team together.
You all convinced the SJB to join hands with your party?
Not
because at the presidential election vote last year, you all were able to do that, but this time around, not enough convincing power or diplomacy took place.
No, this is in this local government election. Obviously, SJB would want to contest alone because they have a large base and there are a lot of people who want to get nominations. So probably this is not the time that you should invite them to come together. But at a future time, when you talk about general elections, I think we will be open to discuss with anybody and see whether we can come to an agreement on the overall economic framework, which is a must, and then a good team.
Would you all consider a common candidate in the future, or because we saw that SLFP leader Maithripala Sirisena has already told that he wants to contest the next presidential elections. So would he be on the cards for your party as well?
If the next presidential election comes, let's say in 1 year's time, there's a constitutional hitch. It's not possible, but let's assume somehow it comes.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if it comes, I think our main enemy would be the current president.
Main enemy?
Our main enemy, political enemy. Political enemy would be the current president, who's suppressing democracy, who's ruining the economy, continuing everything that he has done in the past. So defeat him, probably we will have to look for a common candidate, probably. I don't know. I don't know what will be the situation, but there's a strong possibility that we should look at a common candidate, because it has to be a two-man race. A three-man race will give an undue advantage to somebody who probably does not have the people's full mandate.